Good morning. We're in the middle of the beginning of a new series. When a prison inmate walks from death row to the place of execution, he is referred to as a dead man walking. So, when Jesus leaves the upper room and walks to the Garden of Gethsemane, then he is a dead man walking. Jesus talks with his disciples en route from the upper room to the Garden of Gethsemane, and the conversation is recorded for us in John's Gospel, chapters 15 and 16. So, having a record of this dead man walking turns Jesus into a dead man talking. And we have the opportunity to walk along with him and to hear what he says, to listen in on the conversation as he is en route to his place of execution. As he makes his way to the cross, to the garden, and ultimately to the cross, as he is a dead man walking and is talking to his disciples and to us, it's likely that he passes by grapevines, which he sees, vines and branches, maybe even a gardener. He uses these as an object lesson to tell the disciples and to tell us something about what it means to be an authentic follower of Jesus Christ. If you have your worship folder, let's read his words as we listen to this dead man talking. John chapter 15, verses 1 through 4. We'll work our way through this. We'll be done the week after Easter. But we're going to listen to this conversation and think about it together. Here's what Jesus says, begins the discussion. I am the vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Jesus says, you're already clean. This is his first statement. This is the thing that he tells them and us. The elements of the lesson spelled out in the drama. Jesus is the true vine. The disciples are the branches. And the Father is the gardener. Jesus is the true vine. That's the way he describes himself. I am the true vine. True is not true as opposed to false. It's true as opposed to authentic, real. It's the opposite of counterfeit. Somebody who poses as a vine but really isn't. Jesus, when he says, I am the true vine, he's saying, I'm really the vine. In contrast to vines that might express that they are able to produce fruit but really can't. In Isaiah 5, Israel, the nation of Israel is described as the vine. And in that text, it says that the Father is the gardener and Israel is the vine. He looked good for good fruit but didn't find any. Jesus contrasts himself with Israel in particular and with people in general. When he says, I am the true vine, he's saying in contrast to Israel, the vine, in contrast to people, the vine. And I think his point is Israel and we, as people, we make lousy vines. Jesus is the real vine. People are the branches. We make lousy vines, but we make good branches. We're not good at producing fruit. We are good at bearing the fruit that the vine enables us to bear. The vine produces the fruit. It takes nutrients from the soil and transmits them through the vine to the branches, and the branch then, remaining in the vine, can bear the fruit that the vine produces. We're good at that. We're good at bearing fruit, but the vine is the one that must produce fruit. The Father, then, is the gardener. And here is where Jesus' focus rests as he begins this conversation. He doesn't focus on himself as the vine. He doesn't focus on us as the branches. We'll look at that next week. He focuses on the Father as the gardener. He focuses on the activity of the Father. The Father, again, as the drama showed, cuts off and cuts back. He cuts off branches that do not bear fruit. He cuts back branches that do. We had a couple of apple trees in the backyard. I say had because they did not survive their pruning. I went out there with a handsaw and a chainsaw. And when the dust cleared, I thought that I heard faintly some of the other trees blowing taps. And they were right. That tree had no chance. In fact, there were two of them. They had no chance of coming back. We had to remove a tree from the front, and so they were put out of their misery in the back. A real gardener knows how to maximize a branch's ability to bear fruit. And this is what the Father does. This is why He prunes the branches. There's one word that's translated two ways. Look at the passage again. I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes. Circle that. Prunes. So that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean. Circle that. Clean and prune are the same word. So to be cleaned is to be pruned. To be pruned is to be clean. When He says you are already clean, what He's saying is you're already pruned. Again, it's exactly the same word. He tells them, Jesus does, that they are already clean from what prevents fruit bearing. I want to stop there. Think with me. He tells them, you are already clean. That's a strange statement, isn't it? And what He's saying is the thing that gets in the way of fruit bearing, it's already gone. Now let's think of who He is talking to and when He's talking to them. He's talking to the disciples. And when He's talking to them, they're not cleansed from sin yet because He hasn't died. Right? You're already clean. And He's going to cleanse sins at the cross by being crucified. He hasn't been crucified yet. And yet He tells them, you're already clean. So what is He talking about? What is it that gets in the way of fruit bearing? You understand my question? Maybe He's thinking of human frailty and weakness. That's what gets in the way. Fear and anger and discouragement. Maybe that gets in the way of us being the people He wants us to be. But that can't be true either, because Peter is hours away from denying Jesus. And if Jesus says you're already clean, Peter wasn't cleansed from his fear. In fact, what had just happened, they just had an argument about which of them was the greatest. I mean, envy. They're envying one another. So it can't be referring to human frailty and weakness. So I guess here's the question. What in the world is He talking about? What are they clean from? If they're not clean from sin, because He hasn't died, if they're not clean from human frailty and weakness, because they're still frail and weak, what are they clean? What are they cleansed from? In what way are they already clean? And I'm going to answer the question, but I want to let the question sit for just a second, because I think it's an important question, especially when we point it back at us. What do we need? Well, let's put it this way. We're thinking of the activity of the Father. What does the Father need to remove from us in order for us to bear fruit? What He tells them, you're already clean from that thing, and they were already cleansed from sin. They weren't cleansed from human frailty and weakness, so what is it? Apparently, sin is an issue, but sin doesn't get in the way of, and again, we're going to clarify this, but there's something that He's referring to when He says you're already clean. He's not thinking of sin. He's not thinking of weakness. So, for you then, we're so busy trying to get sin out of our life. Now again, does that have to go? Absolutely. But when we focus on getting the sin out in order to be productive, He says, well, that's not really the thing that gets in the way of productivity. We try to be strong, overcome our weaknesses. But that can't be the issue either. So, you understand why I think this is a good question? Does that make sense? What stands in the way? In what way are they already? He already cleansed them. Look with me at a verse, John 17. It's under letter A. Here's what Jesus said. I revealed you to those whom you gave me out of the world. Before Jesus goes to the cross, He talks with the Father about what has been accomplished. This is the longest prayer from Jesus that we have in the Bible. It goes the entirety of John 17. We looked at it in a series called The Mind of Christ. What was He thinking about? And what Jesus had accomplished something, and this is what He said. I have revealed you to those you have given me out of the world. He hadn't gone to the cross yet. Again, you understand what I'm saying. That's the work He had already completed. He had revealed the Father. This is the work He had accomplished. He had reworked their image of God. Don't skip over this. What would our focus need to be in order to be the people God wants us to be? We would need to have a clear image of what God is like and what He is not like. This is what Jesus cleansed from them. They had images and thoughts of God that Jesus reworked. These are the things that He worked on in their brain. Because He'll say in John 17, the words that you gave me, I gave to them. And what were those words about? It was about the character of the Father. Who is God like? What is God like? That's what He clarified. And what Jesus is saying, you're already clean because I've already reworked your image of God. And that is the thing that either makes or breaks fruit bearing. That's surprising. You know, we tend to think that if there's actions, that we need to get rid of bad actions. Thoughts and attitudes. We need to get rid of bad attitudes. In the Bible, it has 3 words for the things that we focus on changing: thoughts, attitudes, and actions. Actions, that's clean, isn't it? It's the behavior. Attitudes comes before the behavior. It has to do with our underlying attitude towards things. And underneath actions and attitudes, the Bible describes thoughts. Thoughts. In fact, it says that God's Word judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Thoughts and attitudes are what are deep within us. You can't see them in our actions. Only indirectly by our actions you can see them. But thoughts and attitudes are our responses to God's will. Thoughts are our images of God. It's the thoughts that we have of God. Deep down, thoughts that we don't even want to face, that we're not even aware of. See, the disciples didn't even know that thoughts were their problem. And that's why He worked on that. He said, you're already clean because I've been telling you about the Father for 3 years now. And I have removed those thoughts that are not in line with who He is. And I have replaced them with thoughts that are in line with who He is. And now you are ready to bear fruit. I think that's what Jesus is saying. Actions and attitudes don't get in the way of fruit-bearing. Thoughts do. What needs to go? Misguided thoughts about God the Father. These need to be replaced. This is really hard for us to believe. I think it's not just you, me. We tend to focus on our behaviors and really think, oh, these thoughts about God, nice schmice, you know. But let's really get down and deal with things. What would it take to deal with things? You know what Jesus did when He dealt with things? He said, let me get out of the way the thing that's really tripping up. And we know what He changed. He cleansed them from errant misrepresentations of God. Jesus says, that's the thing that has to go. That's the thing that God judges. That's the thing that's in the way. Look what He says in the second verse, John 1, 16 through 18, at the top of the page. From the fullness of His grace, we have all received one blessing after another. John 1, verse 17. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made Him known. It says that God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, it's speaking about Jesus. Jesus existed eternally with God as God before coming to earth as a baby. Therefore, He is in a unique position to be able to reflect what God is truly like. And it contrasts Jesus with Moses. Moses reflected God in this way. Jesus reflected God in this way. And it says they represented God in different ways. What is God like? Moses revealed God as a commandment maker. That's what God does. God lays down rules and says, if you obey the rules, I'll bless you. If you disobey the rules, I'll curse you. That's the way Moses reflects God. Jesus reflects God as a commitment maker. Now, does God have standards? Absolutely. But what Jesus will focus on is not this image of God as a commandment maker. He will list God as a father, as a commitment maker. Which one is true? Which one is real? Which one represents the truth? We try to mix them up. Well, He's really both. I don't think that works. This image and this image are in conflict, which is true. If you put your finger on the pulse of who God is, what do you find? Commandments or commitments? Your answer to that question will either foster or prevent fruit bearing. Seems to be what Jesus says. Which one represented God as He really is? Jesus did. If this is so, then thinking about God as someone who blesses those who keep His commandments and curses those who don't. I'm going to say this again. If this is true, if what we're pointing out here is true, thinking that God blesses those who keep the commandments and curses those who don't, that thinking needs to be pruned. Why? Because it's not what He's like. It gets in the way of fruit bearing. Jesus revealed God as He is. It says the law was given through Moses. When Moses represents God, he represents law. And so we get the understanding that God at His heart is lawful. He's a lawmaker. It says the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The difference between grace and law? Law gives you what you deserve. Right? Law gives you what you deserve. If you keep, then you get. If you don't keep, you don't get. Grace gives you what you don't deserve. It's completely the opposite. It's giving people who don't deserve blessings. That's what grace means. Literally, unmerited favor, an undeserved gift. Law gives people what they deserve. Would you agree with me? Does this make sense? Law, what do you get? From law, you get what you deserve. What do you get over here? What do you get with grace? Do you get what you deserve? The answer is? No, it's different, isn't it? And we try to pull these together. But they're not the same image. Which one is true? God cleanses us by the influence of grace. Look what it says in Titus 2. Titus chapter 2, it's the last verse under section A. It says, "For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men." The grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. Contrary to law, grace, this is what appeared in Jesus Christ. This is what Jesus Christ reveals to us about God. So, He reveals God's grace to us. So what? Look what it says. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives. What is going to teach you to say no to ungodliness and live present holy lives? Law will. Law teaches you to say no and enables you to live a self-controlled life. That's not what it says. Law doesn't do that. Grace does. And this is what it says. Now again, we have questions. How does this work, Mike? But this is the thing that needs to be cleansed, apparently. Grace teaches us to say no to ungodliness. Understanding God gives undeserved gifts. When that sinks down into our thoughts, becomes part of us to the degree. Now, this is not all or nothing. All of us are pulled in two different directions. We believe that and we believe this. I believe both of them because we were raised and it's hard to separate it all out. To the degree we move in this direction, we will have those things removed, cleaned, pruned that get in the way of fruit bearing. So I still get mixed up. I'm a legalist at heart. I'll tell you what, though. I'm going in this direction. This is the direction I'm going in. I'm going towards grace because this is the direction I go in if I want to bear fruit. This is the direction I go in if I want to live a self-controlled, upright, and godly life. How do we know? Just what Jesus with the text said. God makes commitments. Being conscious of God's commitments is being conscious of God's grace. God cleanses us from the influence of law. Look what it says in Leviticus chapter 20. Text down at the bottom. Here's what, through Moses, God proclaims. You must therefore make a distinction between clean and unclean animals, between unclean and clean birds. Do not defile yourselves by any animal or bird or anything that moves along the ground. Those which I have set apart is unclean for you. You are to be holy to me, because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. So to be a Jew, to follow Old Testament law, if you look at it, means that you have to carefully separate yourself from what is unclean. That's what it meant. That there's clean and there's unclean. And what you do, you go to clean things and you stay away from unclean things. As a Jew, I don't think they had ever in their life heard this statement. I think the disciples are hearing something they've never heard before. You are already clean. How in the world can I be already clean? I have to still look out for unclean things and clean things, and I have to be careful to separate from myself from everything that's bad. And how can you say I'm already clean? That's what he says. You're already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Judaism was an obsessive-compulsive preoccupation with clean. I'm not blowing it up. I'm not saying, boy, they really got it wrong. They didn't get it wrong. This is the way Moses reflected God. And they were going on the basis of what they heard. The Pharisees literally means separated ones. And the Pharisees, they couldn't go over to your house for dinner because you might not have tithed on the seeds in your garden. You might have grown corn. And there was an ear of corn, and you didn't pluck out every kernel and remove every 10th one and give that to God. So I can't eat your corn because you didn't tithe your corn. And little mustard seeds. And their life was a continual, constant, diligent preoccupation with not being associated with clean. In fact, if somebody who didn't know the law sat on a seat, they wouldn't sit on it. Why? Because they were separating themselves from what is unclean. That's what it meant. You know what we're doing? We're really kind of walking around a question, aren't we? We're just walking around it. What does it mean to be holy? That's the question we're walking around. What does it mean to be holy? What does it mean to be pure? What does it mean to be clean? What should our focus be? I think we can make a distinction, can't we? In the Old Testament. Being holy, because it has the words there at the end. You see them? Verse 26, you are to be holy to me because I, the Lord, am holy. I've set you apart from the nations to be my own. If you're going to live by the Old Testament requirements, what Moses communicated about God, which Jesus replaced, what you're going to do if you're going to live here, to be holy means to distinguish between clean and unclean. Would you agree with me? That's what it meant to be holy, to distinguish between clean and unclean. So if you're going to follow in that, what you're going to do is be really careful never to go near anybody who's unclean or touch anything that's unclean. Stay away. Stay away. And that would be being holy in the Old Testament sense of the word. The law was given through Moses. Distinguish between clean and unclean. Okay? Is that what Jesus says? What does it mean to be holy, according to Jesus? Distinguish between what's clean and unclean? Look at that verse 1, this last verse we'll look at. 2 Peter 1, 13 through 16. It's the first verse under letter A. You must therefore make a... No, I'm sorry, that's not it. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Be self-controlled. Set your hope fully on the grace to be given you when Jesus Christ is revealed. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. For just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. It uses the exact same words, but turns them in a different direction. In the Old Testament, it used those words to say, separate, distinguish between clean and unclean. What does this text tell us? It says, distinguish between now and then. That's what it says. Distinguish between now and then. Set your hope fully on the grace to be revealed, on the grace to be given when Jesus Christ is revealed. Make a distinction between what you get now and what you will get then. Don't distinguish between clean and unclean. Distinguish between what you get now and what you'll get then, because when He comes, at that time, you will get everything you're looking for. When we live for now, that gets in the way for holiness, in the way of holiness, doesn't it? Would you agree with me? When we live for now, I want it now. And I'm going to murder you or I will seduce you in order to get what I want because I want it now. That gets in the way of holiness. And what it says then, set your hope fully on the grace to be given when Jesus Christ is revealed. Distinguish between now and then. And when we do that, we don't have to eliminate people as clearly when they get in our way. Because we're not going to get it now, folks. Now is not our time. He gives us what we need. But we're going to have to wait. But you know what? It's easier to wait when you're not preoccupied with doing this. If you're separating from clean and unclean, and if that's what holy looks like, you're not waiting. You're judging. You're judging. You're unclean. You're clean. You're unclean. You're clean. That's the thing that gets in our way. If God is a commandment maker at His heart, do this. But that's not what Jesus says He is. Jesus says He's a commitment maker. His commitment to you is you will be in a good place 100 years from now. God is like this. He makes commitments and He keeps them. You say, but Mike, I'm not sinless and I'm not... I understand that. What Jesus would have you do, get it in your mind what God is like. He's not that, He's this. And as you understand He's this, it will help you to wait for Him. Choir's going to come up. The two things to kind of maybe to put this in a... This is what Jesus says to us. You're already clean. Again, choir, come on up. We're going to have a closing song. Gaze at God's commitments and glance at God's commandments. Why? Because as you do that, it will cleanse you from the things that get in the way of fruit bearing. The more you understand His commitments to you. Now, you have to know His commandments, but glance at them. Don't gaze at them. The more you know His commitments to you, the more it will help you to wait for Him to keep them, and the more holy you will be. Father, thanks for your word. I'm so glad this conversation is recorded. What an opportunity to be able to listen, think about what you said, Jesus, when you were here, your swan song, your parting thoughts, to be able to hear these things and to think about them and to hear you tell us them and us, you are already clean. And that really challenges the way we approach you. Some of us, when we think of you, our thoughts immediately go to our behavior, how we've done wrong things, and how mad you must be. And you want to prune that type of thinking. Again, behavior counts, but it's not what we focus on in order to behave. Believing leads to behaving, not the other way around. And so I pray that even as we continue with this journey, that we would understand your thoughts, Jesus, so that we would think things about God that would allow for fruit bearing. In Jesus' name, amen. Hope you're